This training video covers step 11 of the HeavyJob Foreman's Reference Guide, Send to Office. In this video, we're going to look at the process of sending your time card, safety, and diary to the office. We'll look at the job review process that should run when you send. We'll look at the safety review as well. On the screen, I have my HeavyJob time card completed. I've done the employee time, the cost codes. I've filled out the schedules. I've filled out everything on the extra tab, and I am ready to send to office. So I'm going to just go down and click on the Send to Office button. I can tell you that more mistakes are made on this screen than any other screen in HeavyJob. And the most common mistake is to not check your date range when you open up this screen. And this screen that I have open is a perfect example of why it's critical that you check your from and to dates. If I were to go ahead and just click on the internet and send these transactions to the office, I would be sending from 6/20/2014 through today. So the first thing you want to do is you want to verify that the dates are the same as your time card date. If I look at my time card that I have ready, the date is actually back on 10/16/2015. So my send to office should be the same thing. I'm going to go from today, I'm going to go to 10/16 for my from, and also to 10/16 for my to date. And the other things that you want to look at on this screen, in the lower left corner, there are two check boxes, and these check boxes are critical if you are working at a location where you record safety. The export note level images and docs must be checked in order to send in the safety form that you have completed. The export all jobs box must be checked in order to send in your safety time card. So make sure that you glance down and those two boxes are checked. They stay checked unless they get unchecked, but on a new install, they are not checked by default, and we see it all the time where foremen are recording safety but not sending it to the office because those two check boxes aren't checked. The other thing to look at is if you are working at a location away from your home office, they have probably set you up with an additional FTP profile. The FTP profile is a set of instructions that tell the program which office to send your files to. So if you look at this screen, and if your send to office screen has a current profile there, you may want to just verify that you are sending to the right location. You can click the drop down, and I'm going to send it to Test Arizona. I could also send it to Large Project Colorado if I was working on that job this week. This current profile works the same way on the send to office screen and on the retrieve file screen. So make sure that you have the correct profile selected. One last thing before we go ahead and send this. Some locations are also requiring the foreman to complete a production plan each day. So if that's the case, you also want to send in your production plan by clicking on the Export Production Plan box. And since the plan is for some future date, either tomorrow or if it's Friday, it would be for Monday's work, I normally have users set the 3 days of future plans so that would include anything over a weekend. So one last time, make sure your from and to dates are correct. Make sure your current FTP profile, if it's there, is set to the right business unit. Check the box for export note level images and docs. Check the box for export all jobs. And if you are working with a production plan that you need to send the office, go ahead and check that box. I'll go ahead and click the internet button. We always use the internet. And the first thing that HeavyJob is going to do is run the job review. Job review is a list of items that we are having the program look for in order to try and catch errors before we send in the time card. And for job review, for any of these errors, we need to drop down the plus next to the air next to the job and even next to the foreman, and make sure that it is you as the foreman and the date that you're sending. A lot of times, because we export all active jobs, Job Review will actually look at other active jobs in your system, and if there happens to be a time card from another foreman with the same date as the date range you're sending, that other foreman's issues will show up on your job review. So it's always advisable to expand out at least to the foreman and make sure that that is your name, and that means it's your issue. So this works the same way for all of these items. If you expand these pluses clear out to the time card, you can double click on that time card and it's going to take you to that time card and or diary. So I have a diary that I forgot to fill out my working conditions. Very quickly I'll drop this down and I'll put in my working conditions and say okay, and on my diary I'm just going to say see cost code notes and I'll say that's good. So I'll go back to the job review tool and I'll update the list, and you can see that it removed the item of the diary being blank from the list. Now the next two items that we see on job review are items that you will probably encounter with the red triangle, and we call that a hard stop. That means that no matter what you do, you must correct those items before you send your time card. You can see that the ignore issues option is grayed out. I cannot ignore these issues. I must correct them. And again, if you drill down to make sure it's the right foreman, and the error is calculated time is different from entered time on the schedules, I'll go to that time card, and on the schedules you're looking at each employee, the calculated column versus the entered column, and you're looking for mistakes where they don't match. And so I look at my first two employees, 9966. My third employee actually did not work that day, and I put in a 0 and it created a blank for the calculated hours, and a blank does not match the 0 hours. And if I go back to the main tab on the time card and look at him, he was excused 8 hours that day. So on my schedule, I can fix this by using the load schedule. I've already created a 0 hour schedule. I say, okay, the 0 hour schedule sets the start time equal to the end time, sets the lunch start equal to the lunch end, and it actually calculates to 0 hours. I'll say, okay here, and now when I click someplace else, the calc and entered match. I'll go through the rest of the employees, return to job review, update the list, and now that issue has gone away as well. I'll follow through with those last two items. I've got time card has no notes. If I go to that time card and look at all my cost codes, it's pretty obvious that I have a cost code that I've forgotten a production quantity. I'll enter a quantity, and I've forgotten a cost code note. So I'll enter a cost code note, and this was at station 15 plus 25. So a minimum expectation for each cost code note is to at least get in the location of the work. So now I have notes on all my cost codes. Back to job review, and the last two items should clear when I update the list this final time. No issues found, so I can go ahead and continue my export. The next thing that pops up is a report that says I'm missing required safety items. So if your location has you set up to record safety in HeavyJob, the last thing we do before you export your transactions is look to make sure that you have completed safety for that date. And again, it's important when you see this message to make sure it's your name listed as the foreman, because it could list another foreman in another job who has transactions for your date range. When you see this message, if you're required to record safety, you must click no, go back to the time card, and start the record safety process. Because the only way to get credit for safety is to record safety prior to sending in that date's time card. Once I send this day's time card to the office, I cannot go back and record safety for this date. On that send to office, and you see this message, say no, go back, record your safety, and come back, go ahead and export again. The next time you should not see this. If you're not recording safety and you get this by mistake, then you can go ahead and click yes, and it will continue with the export. Transfer files successfully sent to the internet. You really want to look for this message. The message that says they were unsuccessfully sent doesn't look that much difference, so make sure that you see the successfully sent to the internet. Click OK, and that completes your send to office.